Today's video is brought to you by Factor. Where the heck is Morty on Rick and Morty? Welcome back to Nerdist News, I'm Dan Casey, and today we're breaking down the latest episode of Rick and Morty. The third episode of Season 7 brings back some familiar faces, reveals the horrible truth about cryptids, and makes a compelling case for going to therapy.
Before we move off this topic, can I ask if you're currently a hologram?
Yeah, hold on, 1 sec.
The episode also highlights a disturbing trend in Season 7, a distinct lack of Mortimer Smith. Everyone's favorite odd-geezing grandson has been awfully quiet this season, and not just because he's been busy enjoying milkshakes.
My milkshake is empty! Okay.
Seriously though, where the hell is Morty on Rick and Morty? Well, it's a question that speaks to both the meta journey of the show itself and Rick's evolution over the course of the series. We're gonna break it all down for you in just a moment. But to do so, we have to spoil what happens on the latest Rick and Morty. So if you haven't seen it yet and you're worried about that sort of thing, well, leave now before it's too late.
Free danger!
Wow, that's great, buddy. It's going right on the fridge.
Okay, let's get into it, shall we? As we mentioned, for a show titled Rick and Morty, we're not getting very much and Morty this season.
Where are you going?
It's a noticeable absence that the fandom has vocally commented on. And speaking of vocally, Morty's disappearing act stands out in light of the fact that Season 7 introduced brand new voice actors in the title roles. After Adult Swim severed ties with series co-creator Justin Roiland, the show began a lengthy process of recasting Rick and Morty. The Season 7 premiere finally revealed the new mystery men behind these beloved characters, Ian Cardone as Rick and Harry Belden as Morty. We've had little snippets of Morty here and there across the first 3 episodes, but the focus has primarily been on Rick, which means we've had a lot more time to acclimate to Cardone's performance. It also creates a distance between the audience and Belden's version of Morty. The differences are more noticeable simply through a lack of exposure.
You can't talk to me like that. Tell him he can't talk to me like that. You can't talk to Morty like that.
And while I'm sure those concerns will be alleviated and we will get more Morty as the season progresses, in the meantime it serves as a meta way to underpin Rick's story so far this season.
Where are you going? Therapy.
Whether featuring several Morty-light episodes back to back was an intentional choice or a coincidental one, they speak to the deeper themes at play in Rick's character development. Episode 3, Air Force Wong, is another episode that explores Rick's character through the lens of therapy. Over the course of the series, Rick has had a tumultuous and oftentimes contentious relationship with therapy. It started as something he actively disdained. He even resorted to transforming himself into a pickle to avoid going to it.
I'm Pickle Rick!
But Rick's avoidant behaviors and isolationist tendencies often lead him down self-destructive paths, which not only put him in harm's way, but his loved ones as well. His wake-up call seemingly came during the events of Season 2's The Wedding Squanchers, in which the sins of the grandfather were visited upon, well, basically everyone in Rick's life, but especially the grandson. It only ended when he agreed to turn himself in to the Galactic Federation in exchange for his family's safety. Because, deep down, despite his abrasive behavior, his rampant alcoholism, and his deep-seated narcissism, Rick really does care about his family. In fact, much of his behavior is probably rooted in the tragic loss of his family at the hands of Rick Prime. That profound loss instilled a deep sense of nihilism in Rick that's honestly been pretty hard to shake off, and it's led to some uncomfortable situations with both his family members and his longtime friends like Bird Person. Now, we'll continue that thought in just a moment, but first, a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by Factor. Folks, let me ask you something. Is there anything better than eating delicious food after a long day at work? Well, how about eating delicious food that you don't have to prepare yourself? After staying up until the wee hours of the morning overthinking our favorite fictional worlds, I have like zero energy to cook myself a tasty meal come dinner time. And while sometimes it's okay to act like this weird little goblin hunched over your kitchen sink eating mini dill pickles directly from the jar, doing that every night does lasting psychic damage. That's where Factor comes in. Every week, their team of registered dietitians and gourmet chefs design a sprawling menu of 30+ delicious options. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, which is an ironic turn of phrase because their meals are fresh, never frozen. Their meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so you just have to heat them up, enjoy, and then you can get back to the important things in life, like wondering why you spent all that time eating miniature dill pickles instead of doing like anything else. Now, if you want to try it yourself, head to factor75.com and click the link below and use code NERDIST50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Factor offers a wide variety of menu options to suit whatever dietary restrictions or goals you may have. Their plan options include keto, calorie smart, chef's choice, vegan and vegetarian options, and so much more. In my case, I'm trying to get back into weightlifting, and as such, my body craves protein so I can become the towering beef castle of my dreams. And options like Factor's Protein Plus meals are awesome because they perfectly align with my wellness goals and include at least 30 grams of protein or more per serving. Factor is the perfect option for people who need help sticking to routines or want to take the guesswork out of clean eating. Their flexible plans let you adjust your order size and even skip a week if you're heading out of town. Once again, make sure to head to factor75.com or click the link below in the description and use code NERDIST50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. And now let's get back to the video. Now, where was I? Speaking of people that Rick has wronged and or pushed away through his toxic behavior, this episode brings back yet another familiar face, Unity, Rick's alien hive mind ex-lover, voiced by Christina Hendricks. During their first appearance in Season 2's autoerotic assimilation, Rick and Unity's passion for each other is like a candle drenched in gasoline, burning at both ends. Now, they could be a good match for each other in some universe, but Rick's single-minded obsession with hunting down Rick Prime is a major sticking point. His inability to move on from the grief and anger in which he's encased himself has led to a form of emotional stasis. In their initial breakup letter, Unity told Rick that the reason they were attracted to him was the same reason they couldn't be with him. You can't change. Now, for a while, Unity's words seemed to ring true. Rick's self-destructive, ego-driven behavior routinely not only endangered his existing family, but left him feeling more alone than ever. And this, in turn, led to one of the absolute lowest points in Rick's life, in which he built a euthanasia device in his garage. But Rick seemingly proved Unity wrong in Season 6 when he finally decided to go to therapy himself.
We need to talk.
In Season 6's Analyze Piss, Rick began seeing Dr. Wong to better understand why he's constantly targeted by 90s-style supervillains that have a bone to pick with him.
I'm a walking target for a never-ending sea of angry nerds that think getting in a fight with me is some kind of, platform.
He finds common ground with one of the most pathetic of these villains, Pissmaster, whose reputation was absolutely ruined when Jerry publicly beat him to a pulp. #FlamingoDad. In an attempt to connect with this troubled man on a human level, Rick heads to his apartment only to find that Pissmaster had taken his own life. It was one of the most heartbreaking and affecting moments in the entire show, and it was something that led to one of the purest expressions of empathy from Rick. He tried to redeem Pissmaster's legacy.
Pissmaster, you saving that cat to make people forget you suck?
Nope, just saving it to save it.
It's a rare moment where Rick is actually able to put his ego aside and do some actual good in the name of helping rehabilitate someone else's persona.
You guy's a hero, I get a win I'd otherwise never get myself. Nice wet bow on top.
I'm tempted to second guess a lot of that, but I think you might be nailing it.
And that level of abstraction may feel like a smokescreen for Rick genuinely changing, but it's the most visible start of this meaningful metamorphosis for a man whose life is characterized by a prevailing sense of nihilism. Now, by the end of that episode, Rick did seem to lapse back into some of his old habits. He undermined the selflessness of his actions by trauma dumping on Morty, and maybe that was out of this perverse need for praise and approval. And that need is one of the many ideas that are interrogated in this episode, albeit primarily through the lens of the president.
There he is frowning now, of course, as he realizes no amount of spectacle is going to undo his last debacle. Shonda?
Not Shonda.
But it also puts the question of Rick's growth back under the microscope. In the episodes following Analyze Piss, we learned that Rick had secretly replaced himself with a robot programmed to be 22% nicer to Morty, rather than actually spend time engaging with his grandson. And despite a meaningful and heart-wrenching examination of the idea of being so pissed at the world that it kills you, Rick decided that all-consuming anger was worth pursuing. And that death drive is so strong that it eclipses everything else in his mind if what he's doing brings him even one step closer to finding and killing Rick Prime. And now, in Season 7, Unity is back, and Rick is once again at a low point in his life, seemingly unchanged after all, just as they said in their breakup letter. And while they acknowledge their tendency to bring out the worst in each other, they care deeply about Rick, and they take over Virginia in an attempt to get his attention and make sure he's doing okay. And there's a clear through line for how Rick got here. Episode 1 of the season saw Rick returning to his self-destructive, substance-abusing ways, rather than doing the hard thing and having a meaningful, honest conversation with a friend who was in genuine pain. He even lashed out at Morty at the episode's outset when his grandson was just trying to help.
Any progress?
Yes, Morty. I found the version of me that killed my wife. You just missed it.
Okay, I get it.
Episode 2 saw Rick achieving happiness through overcoming the selfish demands of his ego and finding a kindred spirit when he and Jerry found their minds scrambled together. Unfortunately, it also led to a whole Dr. Manhattan-style scenario with a bunch of dead guys with hamburgers in their mouths.
Dead criminals' mouths, Summer.
You're defending them.
Well, they were my husband and father.
It was an adventure motivated by a need to rescue Morty and to protect the Smith family, but one that ended with Rick Body and Jerry Body transcending their past lives and trying to leave their loved ones behind.
I thought when you came to rescue us, you learned to love us more than ever. You learned the opposite?
Now, ultimately, we saw Rick and Jerry both return to status quo, and it's one where Rick is angry, bitter, isolated, and pushing his loved ones further and further away. And this behavior is reflected in how Rick treats Unity this episode. His hostile behavior creates a scenario that not only drives away people that care about him, but puts them in harm's way. And yet Rick is not without remorse, because we see that when he misdirects his anger at Summer, blowing up on his granddaughter in the garage.
Sorry.
As we've seen time and time again, Rick's ultimate conclusion is that no man is an island, and even the smartest man in the universe needs to ask for help sometimes. And he does backslide quite a bit. Like almost every episode, it's one step forward and two steps back. But those steps forward tend to be pretty big, while these steps back are much smaller in comparison. Now, in some cases, that help has to come from a medical professional like Dr. Wong. In other cases, it comes from friends and family. And sometimes that help needs to come from within, and for Rick to put his own selfishness aside to connect with others on a human level. It's why he brings a six-pack to the president at the end of the episode. Not just because misery loves company, but because sometimes we all need someone who gets exactly what we're going through, even if one of them is a damn spaceman. Now, perhaps the biggest lesson of the episode is when Dr. Wong explains to Unity that they are wrong in their assessment of Rick.
Unity, I think the reason Rick brought me here is that he doesn't know how to indicate to you he's changed, because he's changing very slowly. But he is.
The trauma of Rick losing his family and the need for vengeance against Rick Prime are perpetual obstacles for him to overcome. They will continually stunt his growth and make that change feel less palpable to outsiders. It's also what makes that lonely scene of Rick drinking a six-pack in his garage and listening to voicemails hit extra hard. But slow and steady wins the race, and Rick may be emotionally maturing on a geologic timescale, but he is changing, and hopefully for the better. The next step for Rick and the season is to remind his family that he really does care about them, and most of all, his grandson Morty. Anyway, folks, there you have it. That's everything you need to know about Rick and Morty Season 7, Episode 3. We'll be back next week with another breakdown of this excellent series, but in the meantime, we want to know, what did you think of this episode? Did you spot anything that we missed?
Danger!
Wow, that's great, buddy. It's going right on the fridge.
Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, make sure you stay tuned to Nerdist.com.